Hey, you motherfuckers, welcome back to another edition of Krazy Quickie. This is episode number 4. I'm your host with the most. I am Cole, and I'm here with the lovely, lovely Miss Amanda.
Hello.
And everybody likes a quickie. Why?
Because they're short and sweet.
That's exactly it. Hey, so today we're going to do something a little bit different. Obviously, today is a huge anniversary of a major milestone in world history and obviously in the United States history. It is the 17-year anniversary of 9/11. We want to take a minute, just, obviously we talk about a lot of fun things, swinging the lifestyle, everything that we do with that. But we want to talk a little bit about that day because obviously that day is something that affected all of our lives just a little bit, to say the least. And we'll talk, don't worry, we'll tie it into swinging a little bit. But I can remember exactly, I think as most people can, exactly where I was and exactly what I was doing when the first plane hit the first tower. When I was in between taking, I actually had the day off, and I was taking our two oldest kids to a doctor's appointment, which is really unusual because usually you did that, but you couldn't have that day off, and so I did. And I was in the car on the way to the appointment when it came on. The first plane had hit, and so nobody really knew anything. I was like, oh my God. And by the time we got to the doctor's office, obviously, I vividly remember watching the footage as the second plane hit the tower. And, at 46 years old, people, my grandparents and your grandparents would talk about what it was like when Pearl Harbor happened. Mm-hmm. And you can't totally grasp what that feels like. Because you weren't there, you weren't alive, you weren't living it. But when you actually live in that moment and you are able to have this incredible feeling, it's almost indescribable, the feeling that rushed over myself. And you could look around and see all the people sitting in the waiting room and the world literally stopped. Mm-hmm. Everything stopped. And you had this unique sense of the fact that you knew it was never going to be the same again. And there was the emotion of fear and the emotion of confusion. And it was almost like, you were in a different world. And obviously we are in the Midwest. So I grew up in Omaha. So having known, I can vividly remember as a little kid, when they made the movie The Day After. For those of you who haven't ever seen it, go see it. It is about what happens if a nuclear war hits. And one of the big emphasis of that movie was what happens to Omaha. Because with SAC Air Museum, or with not the museum, but with Offutt Air Force Base there, it's still a target, would be a primary target in a nuclear strike. So I can still remember as a little kid seeing that movie. I remember crying, Mom and Dad, because that was the same night that Reagan bombed Libya. So that moment of sitting there when the towers were falling, re-seeing that in my brain, but from a unique perspective, because now we were adults, we had kids, and that realization of you feel in a helpless way that you can't even comprehend because this is a different world. There was no place to run or hide. Mm-hmm. And I can remember trying to get through. My mom and dad were trying to get a hold of myself, my brother. People trying to get a hold of people. They couldn't because cell service was almost down across the country just because of the massive amount of people trying to call, figure out what's going on. And then the next planes are hitting in Pennsylvania and the Pentagon. And it was a surreal experience that has never left because that night, do you remember what we had going on that night? I do.
Boy Scouts.
We had a Cub Scout meeting that night because I was a Cub Master, and we made the decision to have the Cub meeting that night. We got a hold of all the parents. We made the decision to have the Cub meeting that night because by the time the evening rolled around, they had already stopped showing some of the clips. Okay, and there's one clip that every now and then on the anniversary you see it, and it is they are down on the ground. The plane is hitting the second tower, and it's looking up at the tower, at tower number 2, and it is as the plane goes into that tower, and they don't show that very often. I will never forget that clip. That and the clip of when the second tower falls, and the people are running down the streets of New York, and you see the huge dust and debris cloud literally curving around the buildings and just slowly engulfing all these people. Mm-hmm. And you just have such a surreal feeling. But we knew that it was really important, or we felt it was important, that somebody had to talk to, there was a whole bunch of little kids that were seeing this, had seen it. And that was probably, as an adult, one of the most challenging speeches I've ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. Because you knew you weren't just talking to, there wasn't a single kid that was gone that day. Mm-mm. Every kid was there. Every parent was there. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room, and you're standing there trying to be like this voice of calm or reason, not just to the kids, but to the adults. Mm-hmm. Sitting there as well. And I will forever remember the looks on people's faces. I mean, by this point in time, it's, 10 hours, about 10 hours later, and still just this total look of shock and like a blank stare, staring back at you. And then we opened up to the floor for questions for the kids. Mm-hmm. And they had a bunch of questions, and that was a hell of a thing. So we took this time, we wanted to do this show because obviously this is something that has to be, it's like Pearl Harbor, it's like everything, it can never be forgotten. We have to remember it. We also have to remember, we talk a lot of times on our shows, on our podcasts, about taking and including everybody. We don't body shame. We don't, anything like that. People are people. Okay. And one of the silver linings, if you would, out of that whole horrific situation was there has never been in my lifetime a time when you actually saw the American people become Americans. Mm-hmm. At that moment in time, here's the deal. It didn't fucking matter if you were white, if you were black, if you were Hispanic, even the folks from the Middle East, and obviously they had way more fears at that point in time because, but it didn't matter if you were Catholic, if you were an atheist, if you were Christian, if you were Jewish, if you were Muslim, it didn't matter. At that moment in time, the entire country came together as Americans, and you were watching people. They didn't have to put calls out to go give blood. Okay, we were in the Midwest. Nothing happened in the Midwest, but they didn't have to give calls out for people to give blood because the blood banks were full. People wanted to do something, whether it was give to a charity, give blood, make a stand, put up a flag, whatever the case may be. That's powerful. And in the day that we live in now, and no, this isn't going to be political about the shit that's going on now, but the number one problem that we face, and on this anniversary, it is so important, is somewhere along the lines we forgot about we're all people. We're all people. And the sad reality of it is you should never have to have an event where over 4,000 Americans die, or 4,000 of any people die in a horrific manner to draw people together. It's a horrific reality that we live in, that we are so petty and so pathetic that we will nitpick each other over things, stupid things that make no difference. It's beyond comprehension that we do that as people, and we do it all the time. I encourage people to spend, obviously you're watching this tonight there'll be all kinds of specials on, for the rest of the week there'll be specials on, and I strongly encourage people to watch those specials. I really encourage you to sit down with your kids, and I'm not talking just little kids, okay? Our kids are all older. They're all adults, but they were little kids when it happened. Sit down with them. Have that conversation. Tell them what it felt like, because someday this event will be 70 years down the road, Okay. And so the only way that you can ensure that this kind of stuff doesn't continue to happen and that we continue to rise above stupidity as humans is that people have to share with people what it felt like, how you felt, that you were afraid. Any motherfucker out there that says that was an adult that says when that happened, there wasn't a sense of fear in them is lying. I don't care if you have the world's largest the world's largest supply of guns and a ranch hidden somewhere. You did not know if you were going to need them at that moment in time. Mm-hmm. So if people don't share that and they don't understand that and they don't understand the emotions of fear, anger, there was a lot of people, I was one of them, that people were saying, let's turn the country that the terrorists were from, let's turn them into a sheet of glass. There were people that were ready to push the button and wipe an entire country off the face of the earth. Okay, probably thank God calmer heads prevailed, but I mean that's a sort of emotion that's tied in with it. And most people that were adults then, if you watch some of those footages, I don't care how tough you are, when you watch firemen going back in the buildings and they're showing the clips of the person's name underneath it, and the little clip that says, well, this person was last seen on the 10th floor, still moving up. Mm. If that doesn't bring emotion out in you, if you don't feel a sense of hurt or a sense of regret, or you don't have a tear come down with something like that, then you're missing the whole point of being human. I mean, you watch some of the most heroic things that probably we'll ever see in our lifetime. Mm. But here's the thing. It didn't have the happy cartoon ending. Mm. You didn't get to see the firemen that were running up, that were bringing people out of the building, that kept going higher and higher and higher. You didn't get to see them emerge from the rubble carrying somebody out. You didn't get to see that. You got to hear about how heroic they were because they sacrificed their life. There was one of the security guards that worked for Stanley Morgan, who was a former veteran, and he single-handedly, the call came out security-wise to tell everybody in the building to stay in their offices. He didn't think that was right. He is responsible for single-handedly ensuring that almost all 2,700 employees of Stanley Morgan got out of the World Trade Center before it collapsed. When they told him he had to evacuate, he said, not until everybody's out. His job was done. It wasn't about a paycheck. Mm. He had done his duty. He was last seen, I believe it was on the 25th floor is where he was last seen. And over the next couple of days, as we watched and we saw the images, you could see the fires burning from space, from the shuttle. As you watch the images, for the first time in our lives, again, you get more of a grasp of what they saw, or they understand Pearl Harbor was all the dogs coming in, all the rescuers, people throwing their briefcase aside and running back to try to find survivors, to try to find people. The problem was there wasn't any. Mm. And not only were they not pulling bodies out, not only were they finding complete remains, they're still finding pieces. And you think about that and you think how traumatic that is. So just, take a minute on a day like this. Remember what it's about. Remember how you felt and what you can do to make sure that you never have to feel that way again. How can you make the world a better place? And take a minute and thank the veterans of this country from whenever they served, whether it was in combat or not, doesn't really matter. Thank your fire, thank your police, thank your first responders that do a job that most of us would want to do. Take time, remember what the day is. So for the time being, doing it the only way I know how and the only way I want to, Kasbh style, out.